Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today we are going to be doing another one of my 2022 draft scouting reports, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at Kansas's wing Ochai Agbaji. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. Moving on to some stats regarding Ochai Agbaji. He is 21 years old, stands at about 6 feet 5 inches, weighs about 215 pounds, and has about a 6 foot 10 inch wingspan. Very, very impressive physical profile for the wing. I was going to say young wing, but he's not all that young compared to the other prospects that we've covered so far through this draft process. However, moving on to his on-court stats, he is a senior. This is his fourth year at the University of Kansas, where he is averaging 19.9 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.6 assists, and 0.8 steals per game. Pretty impressive stats, and the efficiency backs up his efficiency numbers back up these impressive stats. He has a 60.5% effective field goal percentage, which is very, very good. However, he is shooting a pretty pedestrian 73.1% from the free throw line, something that we will talk about later on in the video. As I include in all my videos, I love to include prospects' three-point attempt rate. I'll explain it. I'll keep explaining it every video just in case we have new viewers on the channel. I'd like to include three-point attempt rate. It essentially means that out of 100 shot attempts a player takes, this percentage of those shots are from behind the arc. So that means nearly half of Ochai Agbaji's shots are coming from behind the three-point line, which is very impressive. As I say every video, I always like to include it to give us a glimpse into the player's shot profile before we actually start breaking down, their tangible strengths and weaknesses. So again, it's just something for you guys to look at before we get to their strengths and weaknesses. And it's very impressive to see him shooting nearly half of his shots from behind the arc. What's also very impressive to me, I included it in the previous video with Blake Wesley with his usage percentage to just show how much he was shooting. Not necessarily shooting, but dominating the ball for Notre Dame. However, in Ochai Agbaji's case, I wanted to include his usage percentage to highlight the fact that the ball isn't necessarily in his hands as much as some of the other top scorers in the nation. He only has a 25.2% usage rate, which is also very impressive. Which, that combined with his efficiency, especially from behind the arc, he's shooting about 44% from behind the arc. It's all very impressive. And again, I like to include all this just to give you guys a glimpse into a player's shot profile. Moving on to the strengths of Ochai Agbaji as a prospect. First up, I want to talk about his prowess on the defensive side of the floor. I believe that to be the more impressive end of his game, in my opinion. I believe him to be a much better defensive prospect than he is an offensive prospect. So moving on to his defensive strengths, in my opinion, I believe him to be one of the best point of attack defenders that we've covered so far. As I mentioned in my second bullet point, just his length and fluidity as an athlete. Being 6'5" with that 6'10" wingspan, personally, it looks a little bit bigger. The 6'10" measurement was from before the season started, and primarily from him doing the NBA combine last year. However, I believe it to be right around 6'11". That's just my personal opinion, but his just fluidity as an athlete, he just moves across the court with such ease, and more specifically, his fluidity in terms of his lateral movement, the way he's able to move side to side. He pretty much starts off plays guarding the opponent's lead ball handler, their point guard. And as the play goes on, he'll end up switching onto their wings and even their big men occasionally, which we will talk about in a second. But he's able to lock down whoever he's guarding efficiently, and just his ability to switch on ball, whether it's guards, whether it's 6'5" guards, or it's 6'9" wings. He does such a great job at guarding each position and guarding them very efficiently. And as I state, his length and fluidity, especially laterally, I only see that translating to the NBA level, right? And you can't really teach a player having the strength that Ochai Agbaji has, how quick he is, his wingspan, his natural instincts on the defense side of the floor in terms of, being a point of attack defender. So I feel like that's his best strength, in my opinion. And I feel like it's going to translate to the NBA very well in his rookie year. And I expect him to get minutes as being a very solid point of attack defender. And also, I really, as I highlighted, a couple minutes ago, I also really love his ability to guard the post. It's a very underrated part of his game. And on top of being able to guard, pretty much 1 through 4, he's also able to guard fives in some occasions. There's been a handful of plays where he's been switched onto the opponent's big man, whether it's their 5, their bigger 4s. Regardless, the player will be 6'9" and up, clearly bigger than Ochai, much stronger than him. well, I shouldn't say much stronger, but Ochai is just on top of being, on top of having, plus measurements, combined with being, combined with having that's being 6'5", and just being a very quick athlete in general. He's just very strong as well. He's very lean, very built, and he uses that to his advantage, especially in his lower body, where he really likes to put his lower body into the legs of the big men when they try to post him up, and they just can't really do anything with him. He's just like a brick wall down there, and that's extremely impressive. Again, you just love to see him be able to guard and be such a versatile and effective point of attack defender. And again, as I mentioned before, I only see that translating to the next level as he'll be able to come in from day one and guard multiple positions and guard them on ball and guard them very effectively. My last bullet point about him defensively, I think it's on a much smaller scale. It's something that we will talk about later. His vertical is a big question mark of mine. Again, we'll talk about that later. But he's shown plenty of flashes being a rim side protector for Kansas. There's been a number of plays, specifically against, I believe, when he had 37 points against Texas Tech. He came off the weak side. He was a weak side defender, I believe, on the right side of the court. One of Texas' wings, I'm not sure if it's Terrence Shannon or not, had the ball on the left wing. They drived. It was Ochai's job to kind of step in, and he was able to use his length, rise up. He rose straight up and used his length and got this. He had this really amazing block, and he hasn't had a lot of plays like that, but I think he's shown enough to the point where this could be an area of room for him to grow because, again, being given how strong he is, just given his athletic profile overall, you'd like to see him show much more of a presence around the rim than he has. And if he can add, being a solid weak side rim protector to his defensive repertoire, that's only going to help him translate to the NBA level much, much more. And again, it's not necessarily all there right now. Again, he has a lot of work to do in that aspect. We'll talk about it, later on in the video. Just has his vertical is a big question mark, but overall, I think it is something that he could continue to grow. And if he can add that on top of being able to essentially be a point of attack defender who can guard really 1 through 3, in my opinion, at the NBA level. I mean, he's going to be able to, I think he's quick enough to guard most point guards. I think he's going to be quick enough to, obviously his 2 is going to be his natural position. And I think even given how strong he is, I think he's going to be able to match up with a lot of 3s as well. So I feel like his defensive prowess overall, especially as a point of attack defender, is what I really like about Ochai Agbaji and his translation to the NBA game. However, moving on to the offensive side of the floor, I'm not all that high on him. However, I won't deny that he has some great strengths. Starting off with his shooting, where I'm not going to deny he is undoubtedly one of the best shooters in college basketball. And I do have some issues. Actually, I do have a good amount of issues regarding his jump shot, especially his mechanics and whatnot, which we will talk about in the weaknesses part of this video. However, what really notices me about his shot in a positive way is just how quick his release is. He's able to just get up shots as soon as he catches them, and a lot of that has to do with he doesn't necessarily use all that much elevation in his shot. He doesn't really use all that much elevation in generally on the offensive side of the floor, but really when he's shooting, he doesn't use all that much elevation. He doesn't really bring the ball down. You see a lot of players, they'll kind of catch the ball and then they'll kind of need a second. They'll kind of bring the ball back down and they'll kind of have to rise up again, right? That's not really Ochai, and that's one of the telling signs of a shooter generally is when they have to, if a player has to catch the ball, bring it back down, he needs that second to bring the ball back down and then rise up to shoot. That's usually not a good sign. But with Ochai, that's not the case. You like to see your shooters just catch and rise up as soon as they catch the ball. And Ochai does a great job of doing that. And that's part of the reason why he's just able to get up so many threes and so many shots. And he's able to get hot so quickly because Ochai has a lot of stretches where he'll be cold and then he'll be hot. In games, of course, not necessarily, over the course of multiple games because he's, a 20-point scorer for a top 10 team in the nation, right? But I mean, generally in game, during games, he'll have situations where he won't necessarily be hot, but then he'll just get up, 2, 3 threes in the span of a minute. And that'll really help him get a rhythm. And I feel like that'll also really translate to the NBA level is because, you're not going to have that time. You're going to have even less time. He already has a quick release, but you're going to have even less time at the NBA level to get off your shot than you do at the college level, just due to players that are going to be closing out. I'm just being bigger, stronger, taller, faster than they are at the college level. And I feel like him having such a quick release is only going to help him translate as a shooter to the next level, despite some of the concerns I have regarding his mechanics. And my next point is, he's not the best ball handler in the world. Again, that's something that we'll talk about in the weaknesses part of his video. Not gonna lie. However, just given how athletic he is, he doesn't necessarily have to have the best of handles. He's able to just get to his spots at will, and that's not to say that the handle isn't questionable or there's some things about it that I am concerned with. But just given how athletic he is, he's just able to get to wherever he wants on the court at the college level. And I feel like part of that is due to him just being bigger and faster and stronger than everybody and wider than everybody. Just given how long his arms are, right? But I have to give him credit where credit is due. The fact that he's just so quick out there on the court, and on top of him just being as strong as he is, as I mentioned before, and how long he is, just how quick he is, just the way he's able to just get to his spots on the court is it's really enticing to watch. And I feel like if his handle can even take one or two steps, if he can just get a couple basic moves down, and I don't want to go too much into his handle right now, but he does have some basic moves. But I feel like if he can even add a little bit more to his handle, it's only going to help him in terms of just being able to get to his spots. And I feel like he's just such a good athlete right now that I feel like even at the NBA level, he's going to be able to get to his spots at least some of the time from day one, right? Just because he's just that quick and that strong and that fast and that long, right? So, even though he does have room to improve with his, handle wise, his athletic profile just allows him to get wherever he wants offensively. And, that combined with how quick his shot is, again, we'll talk about his shot later on in the video, but, just given how he's able to just get to his shots and, how quick his release is, that only bodes well for him as he translates to the NBA game next year. And my final bullet point, in terms of his offensive repertoire, is that he's not the greatest of finishers. Actually, he's not all that good of. I'm not going to get into it right now. We'll talk about it later in the video. But he doesn't necessarily finish around the rim with all that much variety. He really finishes around the rim in two different ways. One of them we'll talk about later. But what really stands out to me in terms of his finishing in a positive way is his right-handed floaters. That's his go-to move essentially at the rim whenever he's within 10 feet of the basket. He loves his floaters, especially with his right hand. He doesn't necessarily use his left hand all that much on the court, doesn't really necessarily finish with it all that much, doesn't even really like to attempt shots with his left hand all that much. But, with his right hand, his floater is his go-to move. And there's points where you like the elevation to be better, but generally I really like the touch that he's displayed on them. It's generally very soft, and even though the elevation isn't necessarily there, you love to see the touch be there, right? And I feel like that again bodes well if he can get that shot off at a reasonable clip at the NBA level. That's only going to help him in terms of not just being a shooter on the offensive side of the floor, right? So you like to see him build, on that right hand floater, on his handle, given his athletic profile and given how he's able to just get to where he wants on the court. And again, with that shot, he has a solid framework of skills that he can build upon on the offensive side of the floor. And given the fact that he's gotten better every year in college, it only leads me to believe that he is going to continue to improve in the NBA. Maybe not, drastically, but take incremental steps to becoming a better, basketball player, and his defensive prowess combined with, some of these tangible strengths offensively, leads me to believe that Ochai Agbaji is a very solid prospect. Moving on to the concerns I have regarding Ochai Agbaji. First up, I want to talk about that aforementioned jump shot that we mentioned earlier in the video. As good as the numbers say he is as a jump shooter, I do have a lot of questions about the jump shot overall. First up, I do want to talk about his release, which it's pretty concerning in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times, there are certain situations, certain shot attempts that he does take where the release is fine, where it's nice and high, and given that wingspan, it's pretty much automatic. When his release is high, his shot is perfect. It's beautiful, goes in every time. However, when it's not, more than often, it's not necessarily all that high. It's pretty straightforward, which I feel like it would be so much better of a jump shot. I feel like I say this pretty much every video. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like, if his release was just higher, he would just be a much better jump shooter than he is, and he's already a very good jump shooter by the percentages. And I feel like you really see this issue in the elevation of his release when he's taking contested, pull-up jump shots. There's a lot of times where he'll just, in pick-and-roll situations as the ball handler, he'll, come around the screen and, take one dribble and pull up. And it's just the big man will usually be in a drop coverage situation with Ochai, and then when he recognizes that Ochai, is going to shoot and he has to step up, it just makes it so much easier on the big man in order to contest his shot if Ochai just has, straight that straight release. He doesn't have all that much elevation on his release, so it makes it much easier to contest his shot. And given his wingspan and how tall and quick he is and how quick the shot is, it's really inexcusable. And I feel like if his shot was if the release of his jump shot was consistently high, I feel like he would be an amazing shooter, an amazing shooter. And I feel like his release being low is most evident aside from on-ball situations when he's at the free throw line. You see it all the time in his free throw shot where the release isn't all that high and his shot hits the back of the rim. All the time, the back of the rim. You see the shot, you see the arc of the shot. As soon as he lets the ball go, you see the release, and you're like, all right, that's gonna hit the back of the rim. And the shot, he has a pretty form. He has pretty form. Some of his mechanics after the jump shot, we'll talk about in just a second. But generally, he has a very nice looking shot, very pretty shot. It's a very sound shot except for the release. And I feel like if that release was really fixed and he really just honed in on that release, I feel like that's priority number one for Ochai. Just get that release up, get it high, get it consistent. I feel like he would just be so much better of a shooter. And he's already a 20-point scorer. That's crazy to think about. He has certain issues in his jump shot, and he's already a 44% three-point shooter. He's already one of the best shooters in college basketball, and he has these issues with his jump shot. That just shows you the level of growth that Ochai is capable of. And again, as I mentioned before, he's grown, he's gotten better every single year in his 4-year career at Kansas. So I only expect him to continue to grow. But I really feel like just the elevation of his jump shot is just really my biggest concern with him. And he's already a 44% three-point shooter. Some of you might be like, well, what more do you want from him, right? Well, he would be an even better shooter if the release on his jump shot was just higher. And moving on to a different part of his jump shot, as I noted in my second bullet point, a lot of times after he shoots the ball, his follow-through is extremely consistent. Sometimes he'll hold the ball, but most of the time he'll kind of shoot it and then he'll kind of let it go. Like he'll do a little, like D'Angelo Russell and J.R. Smith kind of do it a lot. I always associate that with them, where it's if you ever play basketball, it's almost like when you're feeling yourself, right? And like you're on fire, you're in the zone, and then you kind of just shoot, and then you kind of just put your hands down right away, I know that just went in, and he kind of does, yeah. And I could tell that's exactly what he's thinking, and you love to see that confidence. But again, he does this thing where he kind of puts, he puts his left leg right ahead of his right leg, and he kind of like tilts back to the side a little bit, and he puts his hands on. He's like, yeah, I just hit that. Right? And he does that far too often. And again, he's a 44% three-point shooter, so great. But, at the NBA level, the minute details matter. The minute details are going to matter in order for him to see as much playing time as he needs, right? And he can't just be acting like J.R. Smith, like he's in the zone all the time. And I hope that anybody out there that has played basketball can recognize that too, because we've all done it. I'm not going to lie. I was a shooter in high school. I used to do the same thing, right? And I understand why he does it, but he does it far too often. Maybe once in a while when you're like you're really on fire, and it's like okay, but to do that, all the time, constantly, it messes with the release of his shot, right? And I feel like he needs to be much more consistent after the shot, and a lot of times he also kind of tilts his body as well, and it's fine if he's going to do that, but he does it as soon as the shot goes up a lot of times, which can affect the trajectory of his shot. I feel like if he just sat there, shot, watched it go in, then he came back, did his little feeling himself routine, then that's fine. But I feel like just ironing out his mechanics after he shoots the ball would even make him a better shooter than he already is. However, moving on to a different aspect of his offensive game is the handle. As I mentioned before, he's able to get to his spots on the court with will, just given how athletic he is. And as I mentioned before, he doesn't necessarily have the worst bag in the world. It's just it's very slow, the moves. Like he's capable of different moves. He's capable of your drop crosses, of your AI exaggerated crosses. He's capable of your behind the backs, behind between the legs. He's capable of your between the legs. But everything he does is very slow with his handle. Even when he's attacking downhill. There's times where I remember playing in particular against, I believe, Baylor. It's either Baylor or Texas Tech, one of the two games where he's coming downhill. It's not necessarily a fast break, but he's getting down the court. He's getting down the court fast, and he's attacking from the top of the key, and he's going behind the back, and he gets the move off one time, right? And it's very slow, and it almost seems like it kind of caught the defender by surprise because Ochai isn't necessarily a player that handles the ball really that much like that. And I'm like, okay, he got by the guy, but that move was incredibly slow. I don't know how that's going to look at the NBA level. And I can you not that same game later on in the same game, he did the same thing in the half court this time, and the ball got plucked right away. The defender said, "Yeah, that's cookies. I'm taking that. Give me the ball." And it's just because he needs a second in order to get the move off. And against NBA ball handlers, they're just going to blow whatever his action is. They're just gonna blow up whatever moves he's attempting to do if they're not quick enough at the NBA level. So although he is going to be a shooter, he's not necessarily going to be handling the ball at the NBA level. You still would like to see him have a better, a much more quicker handle than what he has displayed at the college level. And my final point about him on the offensive side of the floor is just the finishing around the rim. It's an issue. I'm not gonna lie. As much concerns as I have about his jump shot, the finishing is an issue for me, a big issue. And, a majority of the time, as I mentioned in my notes, he fades away. And he can get to his spots. That's not the problem with Ochai. The problem is what he does when he gets to the spots. It's kind of like, you always hear players get to the rim, but they just don't have a plan. And it seems like Ochai is a player that falls into that category where there's a lot of plays where majority of the time when he finishes, he doesn't have a problem getting to the rim, but he's a right-handed finisher, right? As I mentioned before, he predominantly finishes with his right hand almost exclusively. He'll go right, because right hand, when you're on the right side of the floor, you go right, left, layup, right? What Ochai likes to do is he'll go right and he'll slow down, and then off the left-hand foot, he'll kind of slow down off the left foot, right? And then he'll lean away from the basket to the right side of the court, and then he'll try to scoop an underhand layup with his right hand. So he's fading away from the basket, attempting an underhanded layup. And 99% of the time he misses, or the shot is blocked, or sometimes it doesn't even hit the rim. And that is absolutely inexcusable for a 21-year-old, 6'5", shooting guard, 215 pounds with a 6'11". That is absolutely inexcusable. Ochai Agbaji has to be much stronger at the rim than that. It's almost like he gives up before he even gets the shot off. The coaches at the NBA level need to get that out of his system right away. He's too strong, too athletic, too big to be fading away on every single layup attempt. And he's fading. It's not like he's fading away off 2 feet, right? Because if you're on 2 feet, at least you have more control. You have better body control. He's fading away off his left foot, which granted is the foot that he's most comfortable going off with as compared to his right foot, right? Because he is a right-handed player. But you're off 1 foot. You have 1 foot on the ground and you're fading away against Rudy Gobert, Kristaps Porzingis, Miles Turner, Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo. They're gonna send his crap flying like that. Not even gonna be quick. Even back. Jakob Poeltl, it was a pretty underrated center. Mitchell Robinson, Nerlens Noel. They're going to send that shot flying every single time. So he needs to be coached. He's not all that great a finisher. I'm not expecting him to be at the NBA level. He just has too much work to do as a finisher in order for him to be a solid finisher at the NBA level. So I'm not expecting that. He's already 21 years old, right? We're not talking about Jeremy Sohan or Kendall Brown who are 18 years old. We're talking about a guy who's 21 years old. He's going to be 22 by the time the draft happens, all right? So he's much more of a finished product than those guys, even though he has developed every year. But he's much closer to his ceiling than those guys, right? And he needs to be at least better than what he is as a finisher. Very underwhelming. At least go off of 2 feet. He needs to at least go off of 2 feet when he's finishing, because you just can't fade away. And the what really concerns me about his finishing is that even the situation, there's instances where Ochai will plant off 2 feet, he'll take that power dribble, plant off 2 feet and rise up. And again, as I mentioned before, he's like as we say all the time in basketball terms, you get to the rim and you get there, but you don't have a plan. And that happens all the time. There's a number of times where he'll power off of 2 feet. He'll leap down, power off, and you're like, and then you see it. You're like, you see his muscles flex. The dude's built, and you're like, all right, he's about to yam it on this. He's about to get an and one. and the finishing is just he just doesn't have the touch around the rim, especially when there's contact around there. There's pretty much little to no chance that Ochai is going to score. There's a very minuscule chance. And that's not even talking about his left hand, which he doesn't really finish all that much. And his left hand isn't as bad as some of the other players. It's not as bad as a Ty Washington, as we've talked about before, but it's not all there. The left hand isn't all there, and the right hand isn't there either. So, and even in instances where he does go off for 2 feet, he's just a lot of times it doesn't. His shots don't even hit the rim when he goes off 2 feet. And, that's very concerning. It's very concerning. That's why I stated before that I think he's a much better defensive prospect than he's an offensive prospect, because we're talking about a 22-year-old has some, mechanical issues to work out with his jump shot. He doesn't have a great handle, and quite frankly, he's a pretty poor finisher. I mean, despite him having, not the worst, statistics from 2-point range, it's concerning. He has a couple mechanical issues, and just the way in which he finishes, or rather the lack of ways in which he finishes is just very concerning for me. However, moving on to the defensive side of the floor, not all that many issues, just some pretty smaller things that I wanted to address really quick. As a weak side defender, he can get stuck in screens, and he does ball watch a lot. He ball watches a lot, and it's as a senior, as the leader of a top 10 team, I think you'd like to see him be a little bit more alert. I get it. Not everybody can be like a Jeremy Sohan where they're just rotating their head all the time. And he doesn't do a bad job of communicating. But in those slight moments where he's not communicating, there's a lot of times where he just gets caught ball watching, and he struggles to get through, whether it be a floppy set or a couple down screens or whatnot. He can struggle with more advanced plays, and, when he has to get through multiple screens. And more so, as I mentioned before in the strengths, even though he does have potential as a weak side rim protector, as great of an athlete as he is, he just doesn't have like that vertical pop. That's the one part of his game as an athlete, which, as I talk about it now, could probably be a reason why he does struggle, in terms of finishing around the rim, is that he just doesn't have that athletic pop despite having that 6'11" wingspan, right? And, that lack of vertical pop, really hurts him as a weak side rim protector. Even though I did say that he's shown strengths, there's way more instances where the defender just finishes through him because he just can't get up there. And, there's just a lot of times where the defender will just be like, all right, you're long, right? But I'm just going to jump higher than you, and I'm just going to finish through you. And I'm not sure if that can be improved. I mean, I know you can, work on your vertical, but I mean, you kind of are what you are. And at this point in a player's development, at this point in your development in life, in terms of vertical, right? You're not going to see guys make this drastic improvement as leapers. But, you'd like to see it be much better than it is. And I feel like a lot of the other issues, maybe not so much the finishing, but I feel like more so the shooting, the handle. I feel like it's things you can improve on. I'm not sure how much he can improve on in terms of his vertical pop. And, finally, my last concern is that as a strong side defender, I feel like he commits to his man a bit too much. It's almost like he's kind of afraid that he'll lose his man. I feel like it almost seems like he doesn't want to give his man an open shot, which is great. You don't want to give your man an open shot, of course. But I feel like I would like to see he doesn't even offer any resistance, really. He kind of, as soon as somebody drives towards his side, he kind of just stays glued up to his man. And he's too, again, as we keep harboring onto the video, I feel like I'm a broken record saying this. He's just too big, too long, too strong to not make an attempt to pester the ball handler, right? You've seen it with a guy like Tari Eason, for example, that we've covered. First name that popped in my head when we talk about, prowess as a strong side defender, guy who is long, athletic wing, who is great at making plays and making that ball handler hesitate when attacking his side. Even though he might not always get his hand on the ball, he always affects the ball handler's decision making. And, Ochai doesn't do that. And I feel like, he should. I mean, again, he's just too strong, too big, too athletic to not do that. And I feel like if he did do that, he's quick enough to be able to it almost seems like he's too scared to give his man an opportunity to get up an open shot. But again, he's quick enough to get out there to his man, and he's long enough to pick up that pass and jump that passing lane, right? So I feel like it's a part of his game that he should look to explore. So we have finished covering Ochai Agbaji. I'll give my final thoughts before we wrap it up. Overall, I think he is a very impressive prospect. He's one of the true 3-and-D prospects in this draft, right? Throughout the process, we've seen a couple guys. I don't really consider Tari Eason a 3-and-D prospect. I think he's much more of an on-ball creator than he is, a floor spacer. The Baylor wings aren't necessarily 3-and-D players. Even a player like Max Christie from Michigan State, I wouldn't really necessarily consider him a 3-and-D player. Maybe EJ Liddell out of Ohio State, is more so of that 3-and-D mold. But Ochai Agbaji, I feel like, is one of the only real prospects in the first round that is going to be, a true 3-and-D player, more so on the defense side of the floor. Again, as I mentioned, his prowess being able to guard, the opponent's point guard, whether that be a 6-foot guard and then switch out onto their wing and be able to guard them effectively. His physical profile, just how long, big, tall. Excuse me, he's not all that tall in terms of, prospect terms, but, being 6'5", being almost 220 pounds, with a 6'11" wingspan, as laterally quick as he is, he's able to guard multiple positions. It helps him get to his spots on the offensive side of the floor. He's one of the best shooters in college basketball, despite some issues I do have with his jump shot, with his mechanics, with the elevation of his release and whatnot. I feel that he is going to. I feel like Ochai is going to be a solid contributor from day one. Before really diving into the film on him, I kind of viewed him in the ilk of a player like Desmond Bane, where, I was extremely high on Desmond Bane in 2019. A guy who came into the draft being one of the best shooters in the draft, being a smart player and high IQ defender. How did that guy fall to the end of the first round? And then Desmond Bane's one of those players. They make an immediate contribution day one, and then everybody's like, "Oh, well, how did they fall to the end of the first round?" And I felt like Ochai Agbaji was going to be a similar player, but I am not nearly as high on Ochai as I am Desmond Bane. I still expect Ochai to be a top 20 pick, just because of the physical abilities and his defensive prowess, and really he's a good shooter. I never said that he isn't a good shooter. I feel like he could be an even better shooter, and I feel like I do have some concerns in terms of his jump shot translating in certain aspects to the NBA level. But I feel like he is going to be a solid contributor defensively from day one. I'm not sure how much the handle is going to continue to grow just because of how much work he does need to do with it, considering the fact that he's already 21. But yeah, I expect him again to be able to be a solid defender from day one and be able to space the floor relatively well from day one. He's not going to be a 44% 3-point shooter at the NBA level, but just being a solid knockdown shooter is all you can ask from him from day one. And I think that eventually he will become a very solid 3-and-D player, maybe a solid starter at the NBA level when all is said and done. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Ochai Agbaji in the comments. Where do you guys think he should go in the draft? Am I being too hard on him? Do you guys think he's going to be a first-round talent, end of the first-round talent, maybe a top 15 pick? Let me know what you guys think about him in the comments section. And aside from that, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have, please share with a friend. I want to keep growing the channel, keep growing the community that we have here. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every watch, every view, every like. And yeah, that's it. Stay safe. Peace.